Hello, welcome to our webinar today. This is part of Nasco's webinar series, and what we're going to discuss today is 2 FCS nutrition lessons that are especially for the middle school and high school level, although they can be really easily scaled and leveled to upper elementary as well. So we'll be kind of going through in some detail these lesson plans today. We'll also talk about some of the other lesson plans that Nasco offers for free, and then have a couple products that I'm going to talk about, and round out with any questions that you may have today. There are a number of ways that you can interact with us today. We have some polls that we'll be doing, and also there's a question box, so you can type any questions or anything you want to share into that question box, and I'll read it so that everybody can hear what your comment or what your question is, and we can talk about it as part of our webinar today. So thank you so much for spending some time with us on this Thursday as we explore these FCS lessons. We are, talking about some pretty important topics with nutrition and healthy eating, and that's always an important topic, but especially in the stressful world of COVID-19 pandemics. There's a lot of people who, as a coping mechanism, do some stress eating, and as we talk about flattening the curve, there have even been jokes about fattening the curves, and the reality is that that extra snacking and stress eating has on our own health, as well as our students and our youth today. So we're going to explore these ideas. And first, I wanted to introduce who Nasco is. Okay.
Can you hear me now? I heard that we have some technical difficulties with the sound. So is it picking up? Okay. Well, I just did a quick introduction as to the 2 lesson plans that we're going to talk about today. We are going to talk about 2 FCS nutrition lesson plans called It's in the Bag, as well as Nutrition Experts. And both of these allow for people to explore our offerings for free lesson plans while talking about health and nutrition ideas. And we will be kind of exploring those 2 lesson plans in depth, but I'll also do a little bit of an overview of other kinds of lessons that we have, and have a number of ways that you can interact with us, including the question box and the polls. And if you heard this overview already, I'm sorry to repeat it, but we did have some sound issues. So now, quickly, I wanted to introduce who Nasco is. So Nasco is a solutions company, and we are a company that looks for different challenges that are facing our teachers and our youth, and we try to come up with both digital and hands-on solutions. As a company, we're really well known for our kits, so we put together different kinds of assortments of products to help meet some of the challenges of what we should be teaching. With talking about nutrition right now, it's incredibly important at all times, but especially at the time of the COVID-19 pandemic, when people are stress eating and snacking a lot more. Talking about what healthy choices are with students can be very impactful as we get back on a healthy course in so many ways as a nation. So this is one of the ways that Nasco kind of helps provide those solutions, is with free professional development. We also have lesson plans that are available digitally, as well as those hands-on learning kits. So we have an offering that's continuously changing. And if you ever find yourself kind of looking for some solutions or some challenges that you're facing that you want to bounce off of someone, always feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to think about what are the challenges facing our amazing teachers today, and help provide some solutions, and hopefully some time-saving solutions, because that seems to be the age-old problem that everybody faces at all times, is balancing and having enough time when you're teaching 24, 28, 32 students, kind of spreading yourself thin in that way. So we are going to talk a little bit then about a platform first called Nasco Educate, and that's nascoeducate.com, and that features a lot of our lesson plans. So you can see what that dashboard looks like, and this is part of the STEAM MS program, which is a free part of Nasco Educate. All of Nasco Educate is currently free, but after June 30th, it's going to switch to become more of a paid resource and a free resource paired. So you'll be able to kind of explore Nasco Educate in all of its ways from now until June 30th for free. And then after that, some of that content will go behind a paywall, especially kind of the full courses that are available on Nasco Educate. And as you can see, we have a family and consumer sciences folder as well as numerous other folders, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a couple minutes. Also for our FCS teachers, Nasco has a large assortment of products that we offer. So we have an assortment of different kitchen needs, as well as design needs, as well as human services areas, all curated specifically with our family and consumer educators in mind, so that you can kind of look at what we have available to you that's useful in your classroom, specifically thinking about educating with these, and then making it hopefully a bit of a time saver for you. Because of course, our family consumer science teachers are constantly going to the grocery store, constantly looking for more products to create really a rich and amazing hands-on learning opportunity for our students. So I thank you for all of the effort that you always put in. And then a little bit more about those lesson plans, because we're going to do a deeper dive as we get into the two that we're talking about today. We have lesson plans for all three major areas of family consumer science, from design to hospitality, as well as human services. And each of these lesson plans are available on Nasco Educate, as well as nascoeducation.com. And both of them, all of them have the resources that you need to implement it. Extra worksheets, rubrics on occasion, kind of the mechanisms to put these lesson plans into play. So you're able to explore kind of what all is involved with some of these lessons. And we'll go into some of that today as well with two lesson plans. So I wanted to start kind of our conversation that goes a little bit deeper into our different areas of lesson plans with a poll. And I wanted to poll you today about how distance learning is going. I know all teachers are facing a challenge with distance learning, with connecting to students when you can't physically be in the same space, as well as with physical and social distancing. But especially in areas of hands-on learning like family and consumer sciences, I know that you all are kind of really facing a huge challenge. So please kind of fill this out and also add any thoughts or any ways that you've been able to successfully implement distance learning in your classrooms remotely this spring. And I'd be happy to share the ideas that you brought forward with the group, because many people are thinking about what fall is going to look like and trying to come up with contingency plans. So I wanted to give this opportunity to also talk in depth a little bit about maybe some of the things that you all have been doing successfully already this spring, or experimenting with that worked or didn't work, and then I'll share that out to the larger group. And as you're completing that poll, as hopefully you're typing in some of the thoughts and explorations you've had already this year, I wanted to talk a little bit about Nasco's lesson plans, so we have a little bit of time for those things to populate. So the first area I wanted to talk about is our hospitality lesson plans. And we have a number of lesson plans that focus on nutrition. I pulled just two, and I pulled them for a reason. The two I pulled today, one of them is really exploring eating's connection to disease prevention and treatment. So this lesson plan specifically thinks about the nutrients that are needed when you are maybe recovering from a heart attack or kidney disease, and how part of your treatment plan really is tied to your diet and what you eat and what you can't eat, and how those foods impact your recovery. So it looks really closely at how sometimes the food that we eat is even making us sick, and is kind of a really important public health message. And then the second lesson plan I wanted to highlight is our culinary knife kits. And our culinary knife kits I wanted to highlight because it's one of the areas we've been thinking a lot about distance learning. The skills of dicing and mincing are really important and are kind of foundational in a lot of ways. And we have this great kit and a great lesson plan here that is very popular, but we've been thinking, if students can't share things, and if you had to do some things at home, we took the kit that has kind of mad matter, which replaces having to constantly go to the grocery store to buy potatoes for practicing cuts. And we ultimately, have you practicing those cuts with that mad matter, as well as different sizing tools and measuring tools, and make that an individual student kit. So we've been working on that, and that will go live in probably by the end of June at the latest, to try and help in some of those ways. But then also, we have our design lesson plans. And our design lesson plans, one of them kind of puts you in the shoes of an interior designer. And this is something that you could implement remotely as well. It kind of has students think about and talk about how interior designers work, looking at a color scheme, designing a furniture layout, doing those kind of core selections. That's part of that real job. And then the fiber testing kit is kind of a great kit about looking at natural as well as man-made fibers and talking about strength and absorption, stain resistance, burning, as well as heat resistance and more. And is a really nice kind of tie into even a science lesson to explore those ideas. And then our third set is really about human services. And I have some that are pulled up looking at both careers as well as friendships. And that early education career lesson plan is a really nice conversation about those core things that early educators especially need, and having students work to identify that. And that becomes an amazing distance conversation as well, because like FCS teachers who are working through those hands-on learning issues, our early educators have so many barriers that screen provides when you're trying to teach a 5-year-old key concepts and starting to really help with students learn how to read and literacy, and that physically not actually being in that space with those students provides so many challenges, and that COVID slide that we've been talking about, in the news and in so many places. So looking at those key concepts and ideas of what an early educator truly needs is embedded in this lesson plan, and even writing a thank you card for a teacher who's maybe done amazing things for you. And then the last lesson plan I wanted to highlight before we talk about the poll results is our Getting Connected lesson plan. And Getting Connected is all about friendship. And friendship looks different today than it did, 4 months ago, and how the qualities of a good friend are truly ultimately important. So now I wanted to see those results of those polls. So we're going to see what people said in the poll. So it looks like a lot of people are feeling like they had less continuity in their culinary lessons than they would have liked, which is understandable. 3% of people never missed a beat. So I'm really hoping that you have some great advice to share with all of us. And then somewhat is about 27%, and 14% said other. So some of the ideas that people had, and we have quite a few, which is great, is, somebody was asking, what ideas do you have for including nutrition into a 6th grade math lesson? We are definitely going to be talking about that. That's great for our It's in the Bag lessons, which we're going to be talking about. And I'll make sure I'll highlight kind of the math portion of what we're doing to connect to that. And then thank you, Dave, for that question. Vicki said, I don't teach culinary, but I wanted to hear about nutrition for my health class. Wonderful. Thank you for tuning in, because it's true that nutrition offers so many areas. And Dave also said, I wish we had a culinary program in our middle school. And one of the things that we've been talking about is how to help build resources for culinary programs in middle schools. So if you have ideas, email me. I would even love to talk to you, Dave, or anybody else who has a middle school culinary program, because we've been talking about how important FCS is, at the high school level. And we at Nasco dialogue a lot with our high school level teachers who teach FCS, but getting those ideas into the elementary, into the middle school are incredibly important. Amanda said that she's not allowed to give assignments at this time, but looking for new ideas for the new school year. Which is great and true for many people. A lot of school districts have wrapped up a little bit early, but it's never too early, especially in these days, to start planning for the fall. So thank you for tuning in, Amanda. Pamela said that she's been using Edpuzzle much more, so that resource Edpuzzle has been helping Amanda out. And Kristen said that I have given snack types items delivered to each student and used basic measuring amounts, 1/2 cup, 1/3 cup, 1/4 cup, a tablespoon, a teaspoon, etc. And we created 2 individual snack mixes, one for themselves and one to give to a member of the family. And it is a great use of measuring skills. So that sounds like a great lesson plan, is kind of measuring out that food that you have and you're consuming as part of your kind of daily nutrients, and bringing in some of those great measurements for family and kind of making it a family activity, which is a fantastic addition. Thank you, Kristen, for adding that. And then Linda said, really didn't get a chance to connect with students this spring, and I'm not very good with distance learning. I think, Linda, that many people are feeling the same way as you are about not feeling like they're very strong at distance learning, and it's certainly a challenge. And when you start a school year and you have your curriculum set, and then all of a sudden it is thrust upon you, I think that many people are feeling your feelings are similar to them, Linda. Dave also said, when will the slides be available, or will these slides be available? And the recording of this webinar is live on Nasco Educate and will be sent to you about 24 hours after the webinar ends. So you'll be able to see the webinar again and find those slides that you like. Brian said, I've been teaching middle school culinary arts and we've been focusing on nutrition while in quarantine. That's fantastic, Brian. Thank you so much for letting us know and for reaching out in that way. And I would love to learn more. So I might be shooting you an email if you don't mind. And then Peggy also said that SNAP Ed could help in those schools with nutrition and culinary skills. So SNAP Ed is a resource that's been used. And then Jenny said, here in New Hampshire, we've been using Google Classrooms. Students tune into class twice a week and we do a cooking show. I cook while they ask questions and we're in middle school. That sounds like a fantastic way to kind of connect as a class. And also sounds like a lot of fun, the idea of using that cooking show model and the resources. I love that you shared that. Thank you, Jenny. Jenny, actually, just kidding. I'm Jenny. I read the wrong box. That was from TM. So thank you, TM. And I'm sorry that I called you me because that's not the case. So TM, I'm sorry I read the wrong box. Debbie also asked, my question is, how do we know if the students are perfecting knife skills in a safe way, as well as seeing them complete a lab safety? So some of that can be done in video. And the suggestions that we have with that knife cutting kit, for example, is using pictures, is using some video that's shot as well about holding knives correctly. And I think that would be something too that you need to communicate in some ways with parents, that knife cutting skills are being used. While making sausage, I once cut off a good part of my thumb. So I fully realize, even though I'm not an FCS teacher, that those knife skills and knives are very dangerous. So it's true that you want to be kind of very involved in that. And then also Sheila said, will we get CEU for this webinar? And yes, that certificate comes out in the email that will have the video attached. And also she sent home food packets to my high school students. So I'm interested by what's maybe in those food packets. And thank you so much for sharing, Sheila. So lots of good comments about kind of what other teachers are facing in this time, as well as kind of what's front of mind at these days, the end of school, thinking almost done or done with working with students now, but what will the fall look like? So I'll jump back into kind of the 2 lesson plans that I wanted to highlight today. And what those 2 lesson plans are the It's in the Bag lesson, which we'll go over first, and then Nutrition Experts, which is our second lesson that's a little bit more geared towards high school. But this It's in the Bag lesson, especially if you are interested in incorporating some nutritional ideas into a math class, is a great one to talk about. So what we're going to do with It's in the Bag is essentially talk about kind of packing lunch and thinking first about students and what they're eating that they have a choice with and what they have no choice with. And ultimately kind of categorizing what they ate in the last 24 hours and then looking at which food that they ate, if they had a choice or no choice, was healthier or an unhealthy option. I think it's safe to say that for most students, the choice food, the things that they got to choose, are going to likely be slightly less healthy than the no choice food, the things that were given to them in a school lunch or what their families were able to provide for them to eat. And I think that most likely in most cases, those no choice foods are healthier for our students. But part of the reality too is I pulled an old newspaper article that I really liked, kind of talking about this idea of student choice in food. And in February of 2012, so almost 10 years ago, the LA Times reported about how the Los Angeles School District was taking a hard line on nutrition. And they attempted to mold better eating habits into what their students were doing and eliminated flavored milk, chicken nuggets, kind of a lot of the food that were kind of timeless childhood loves that students really enjoyed. And they eliminated those from the menu and replaced them with much healthier options. And after about 6 months, about half the school year, what they found is that there were other ways that students were getting that unhealthy food. There ended up being a black market for junk food, that students were trading and bringing in things from home for food that was less healthy. And at high schools, there was pizza deliveries at side doors of the schools as students would order pizza to try and to eat on campus. And then also there were like full bags of chips that were being brought in and shared among entire cafeteria tables. So students still found a way to get that unhealthy food. And ultimately, the garbages were just getting more of that healthy, nutritious food as students found alternative methods. So the idea of making sure that there still is lots of choice in what students do, but recognizing and kind of getting some of that agency and making those substitutions and making those choice decisions is kind of what this lesson really looks at, which I think is important. And one of the things that this lesson really highlights is, if we can go to the next slide, is kind of how maybe smell plays into some of our choices. So by talking about nutrition in this way, we're eliminating that sense of smell, and exploring that a little is important with your students. Because if you think about how, if you go to a movie theater and you decide in the car driving there that I am absolutely not going to have popcorn. Buttered popcorn, while delicious, isn't good for me, and I don't need it, I'm gonna be okay. And then you walk into that movie theater and you smell that popcorn, and it becomes a much harder decision to make. Because that sense of smell is incredibly powerful when talking about what we're eating. So this study, actually from the Harvard Gazette, talks even about how the taste that we have of food is controlled even by our sense of smell. And to really enforce that with your students, one quick exercise that you can do is have them, pick their sweet treat either at home or bring in a sweet treat into the classroom, and then, eat a piece of it as they normally do, and you can taste kind of the myriad of flavors that comes with it. But then if they pinch their nose and then eat that treat as well, they'll notice that they can't taste as much. If you do this with something like vanilla ice cream, you don't taste that vanilla ice cream. You taste sweet and it feels cold, but the normal blend of flavors that you're used to isn't quite there because our sense of smell is so incredibly impactful in these ways. So what you're using to pack our lunch bags for It's in the Bag are actually some Nasco products that we have, or you can use different photographs for it. But they're pictures of food that are in sets of 100 that allow students to look at the food, and it's actually photographs of some products that we have that are replicas, that are kind of plastic replicas that look really real, of like pizza and macaroni and cheese and pasta and meatballs, as well as, apples and oranges. And on the back of each of these is also the nutrition information. So you have the caloric information, you have the total fat, the saturated fat, the cholesterol, the sodium, the total carbohydrates, the dietary fibers, sugars, and proteins. So lots of really great information on each and every one of these cards. And you're going to use these cards then because it takes out kind of that smell, and it still gives you that really important nutrition information in a really digestible way. But you can do a similar activity with pictures or with kind of different materials as well. And then ultimately what we're going to do is we're going to use this in a couple ways. One of them has you as the teacher kind of pre-pack some random meals that students have kind of no choice in, and using that as a control group. Or you can spread these cards, out on the table and have the students pull what they want as, if you had a meal that you got to choose everything out of, and then have that be the control group of, what are you going to pack? So for this webinar, what I did is I packed my bag of lunch, and I packed in it things that are really commonly found in a school lunch. So we have our white bread with peanut butter as our sandwich. We've got animal crackers. We've got a banana. So I didn't go completely unhealthy for my control, as well as a cookie and like a can of soda to drink. So pretty standard things that you see in school lunches. And then part of this exercise is using that nutrition information on the back and adding up everything that you just used. So we have in this lunch, 771 calories, 29.92 grams of fat, 0 cholesterol, 531 milligrams of sodium, and 6.1 grams of fiber. So that's kind of what this lunch looks like. And then for my no choice, kind of that healthier standard, I chose very similar products so that it's not kind of a completely different meal, but instead made some small substitutions so that students could see the difference and how much that really impacts their nutritional information as they go through and add and see the difference. So in this lunch, I had, instead of a banana, which is a good option, I gave them 2 things, so pineapple rings and blueberries. Instead of soda, I replace it still with a sweet drink, but this is grape juice. And then instead of that white bread, replacing that peanut butter sandwich with wheat bread, as well as having popcorn instead of those animal crackers, and graham crackers as a dessert instead of the cookie. So similar substitutions, and ultimately what we see unfold is that instead of 771 calories, your no choice option now has 406. Instead of 29 grams of fat, almost 30, you now have 3.87 grams of fat in that second lunch. And the sodium decreased by about half to about 264 megagrams, and your fiber increased just a little bit to about 7 grams. So students then can see with those small substitutions how much that really impacts their food. And then using and manipulating these numbers in various ways to get to daily percentages is a really great way to also add more math skills into this conversation on nutrition as you're looking at kind of your daily caloric intake, what percentage of that you're using in these various meals and in different kinds of food that's available to you. In these cards, there's 200 different kinds of food that kind of varies the spectrum. And even if there's food that your students might not recognize, like a yam, it explains what a yam is. You can see the yam, and then you have that nutritional information on the back. So it gets kind of a nice wide array of food choices for students. So the key part of that activity is building those lunch boxes. And then for a conclusion for this activity, students are going to really look at, explaining what the difference was and how that healthy choice versus the less healthy choice kind of impacts their overall diet and eating. So it's got a little bit of a reflection built in as part of this activity into looking at what they're doing. And then if we can move to the next slide, and then the next one. Our second lesson plan today is for our high school group, and is one that I truly think levels well at all levels, because ultimately what it is it's a research project. So if you implement this in an elementary classroom, your students are just slightly less expert because they're looking and reading different materials than what that high school level would be. But it is largely student driven. It's a really nice project-based lesson that allows students to develop information and find information for themselves. So what we're going to do in this lesson is start out by talking about where we get information from. What are the various paths that we have that kind of bring us key concepts? And what we ultimately end up seeing is most students say the internet, and the internet can almost be this entire experience. And you think about all of the different formats and ways that we get information on the internet, from Twitter to Facebook to different news outlets to different blogs, and you can kind of break that down. And in fact, that's what I will end up doing for my example of walking through this lesson plan. But then also all of the other ways that we get information, from marketing and billboards that we drive by, to radio or Spotify and ads that are on there, to newspapers and magazines and books and classroom content that's delivered, and television shows and Netflix shows that you watch. Netflix has a ton of amazing documentaries, right? And having all of those be part of a conversation on what's a reliable news source and what's a less reliable news source. And there's so many amazing examples of lesson plans talking about 21st century literacy, talking about the resources that you use to really dissect what is a credible source, and even current events, which is really, really hard to implement in some classrooms. But there's an ongoing conversation about perhaps a bill changing how Twitter and Facebook have control over censoring or editing or marking something with a fact check mark because of things that are happening with the president and our government today. So this reliable information conversation is a huge one to have that can also then be tied into health and research that we have. And we see that in the news today too, with conversations about what news outlets or what outlets can you trust for information on COVID-19. Is what the WHO was saying reliable and what they wanted people to practice early on? Is the CDC or the Center for Disease Control reliable in the information that they're sharing? And how do students know what they can trust and what they can't trust? And making that a part of this conversation is incredibly impactful as we talk about something as important as health. And what this lesson plan uses as kind of its root is this ball that you can see on the screen that I also have here. And what this ball is it's kind of like a beach ball with 60 different nutrition questions on it. So it's a fun way if you are in the classroom and it's something that you can share after hopefully some of this craziness ends, is students can use this ball to throw it around and play with it essentially, and then use the question that their left hand thumb lands on. So it's a nice random way to get to the information that they're going to research. And that's one of the things about being an expert, is if you're truly expert, you don't know which questions are coming at you when, and you need to know how to navigate those things. And all experts start somewhere. So you use this ball to pass it around, find that question, and then you're going to research that question. You're going to dig into kind of how this project will work and then make a poster out of it. So the front part of your poster can be as decorative as you want, and the back part of the poster is where you're supposed to list your sources. And I always like annotated lists of sources because sometimes students, if you have a source requirement, which I always like as well, but students have a tendency, if they're supposed to have 5 sources, they really used 1 and the other 4 they just used to fill out the sheet. So some form of annotation can be a great way to make sure that you reinforce that this information is supposed to be backed up and collaborated in different ways if you end up having that source limit on it. So as I went through this lesson, what my hand landed on the day that I was working on pulling this resource together, I was landed on, where do you get calcium from? Or, what is a strong source of calcium? So I Googled it, which is likely what a lot of students would be doing, and pulled up in one article from Webmd, all of those, 10 sources of the top calcium-rich foods. So technically I could have been done at this project in one Google and then drawn a poster. But if you have that requirement of a couple different sources, that's important. And even more than that, it's also making sure that, especially at the high school level, that the website that you visited is a reliable source. So I personally go to Webmd often. It's just kind of one of my favorite health sites to go to, and is something that I trusted, but I never actually went to the About Me section or the About Us section until I was working on this project. It was just innate that I trusted it. And those About Us sections are incredibly impactful because you can see who it is. And if there's page transparency and it looks like they have real credentials, that comes through in a strong way. So what I learned about WebMD, for example, is that it is an American corporation, so it has that .com ending, and it's primarily known as an online publisher for news and information pertaining to human health and well-being. On their editorial board, they have both copywriters as well as PhDs and MDs who all create content for the website. And it began in 1998 and is ultimately known as one of the top healthcare websites and is one of the top healthcare websites in unique visitors as well. So not only do I trust it, but it seems like a lot of people go here for trusted information. And I can see also on that page the policies that they have about publishing and about their information. So I can see it's a valuable source. And there's a few ways that you go through that. Not all websites have as robust of About Us section. There's different levels of page transparencies. But even those top level domains after each web address, so whether it's a .gov, a .edu, a .com, each of those things tell us information as well. And explaining that to a middle school or a high school student to really look at those endings as a way to vet information sometimes is important. Webmd.com is a .com, which is a commercial address, but there's also reliable information that's often vetted and peer-reviewed on .govs, on .edus, and using those endings sometimes as an indicator about kind of trusting information. So we have then our research portion, and then we move to visualizing it. And I pulled this example from the lesson plan because I'm not that good at drawing, and the example lesson plan is beautiful. So we'll switch to the question of how many servings of fruit do the group have in one day. So this research project brings out this beautiful end product. Sources are listed on the back. And if you are thinking about implementing this project in a way that also, highlights 21st century skills. So you're looking at those research skills, you're looking at navigating, websites and looking for credibility and looking for those resources. Also, maybe you want to make this then into something like a minute commercial or a PSA instead of having it be a hand-drawn poster. And that's a great option as well to get students to use digital tools, or maybe even have them create their own website on a free website builder with some of this information and kind of build out this healthcare information, nutrition information, and 21st century skills. Plus, that will actually reinforce how easy it is to build a website on the internet. And if you own your own site, maybe you don't always have the most factual information if people are kind of creating their own information, and how you want to make sure it's reliable what you put out there in the world. So students then should share this somehow, whether it's that poster that maybe you can hang up in your classroom or in the hallway, or if they're going to, build a website or have a PSA to explore, there's multiple platforms that you can take this. But ultimately, because they're now nutrition experts and kind of concluding what this lesson is, that expert definition is really important. So what an expert is a person who has a special knowledge or skill relating to a particular subject. It also can be an adjective that allows you to be an expert in something, and students should be exploring what that means. And also the realization that not all experts are born experts. No expert is. It's a combination of lived experience and learned experience. And that by doing this lesson plan, they can have that sweet combination of lived experience, learned experience, and then share it out to reinforce their own knowledge and confidence in their ability to also help teach this nutrition information, which is an incredibly empowering option for them and action for them as they're navigating that research skills, and then the kind of curating and analysis of what they're going to choose, and then sharing that out in the world. So like I said, I think that it can be leveled very easily, but of course your expectations at the high school level just look different on what that expert is versus maybe what you might have expectations for at a lower grade level. But I think everybody can benefit from an analysis of the information that we have. So I wanted to check again at my comments, and I have another one. So Jennifer just chimed in and said, myself and another colleague are going to be hosting a virtual culinary camp in a few weeks. I'm up for the challenge of having a culinary camp online, and I'm truly excited for this opportunity. So Jennifer's got this great idea of even a full kind of summer camp virtually online for teaching those skills, and that sounds really fun and amazing. And I love that you're going in this way. Dave said that the nutrition ball looks really engaging for students, and I think so. I mean, in a normal classroom, taking a break and throwing a beach ball around, and it really is kind of a nice flexible ball, so nobody is going to really get hit. It's got that beach ball consistency. It also comes with a patch because, let's be honest, sometimes students get silly and they might fall on it. So there's patches so that in case anything happens, it's more resilient and can kind of survive that abuse at points. So other things that I wanted to highlight is kind of some FCS product that I like. The first one is going to probably be our My Plate, which reinforces some of those key principles we were just talking about with nutrition as well. And this is a product that Nasco helped create along with some USDA help and partnership. And so we created this plate that literally is just your dinner plate. You've got your dairy over in the circle, and then you've got your vegetables, your protein, your grains, and your fruit, and it's all divided up. So if this is just a plastic plate, if this becomes your plate, each night for dinner or for lunch, then you have this proportion of what it should be, of your vegetables, your fruits, your proteins, your grains, and your dairy to get you a nice balanced meal. And it's a really nice kind of visualization if you're setting your lunch out and you've got to categorize what you have and make sure it fits where it's supposed to go. There's also a variety of products. There's the plastic plate, but then there's also paper plates and different kind of magnets that you can put on your refrigerator to remind you of these same principles, or a filing cabinet in a classroom that has kind of that really nice division and visually part of that plate actually for your students to explore. And then also I wanted to highlight just really quickly kind of a fun bingo game, which bingo is an age-old favorite of many of us and many students. And what this bingo game does is it teaches kind of important abbreviations in the kitchen. So this bingo game is going to help students realize what that Fahrenheit symbol is versus that Celsius symbol, the pint, what a calorie is, a pound, a foot, a millimeter, a dozen, an hour, kind of some of those really common abbreviations that you see. And this might even be something that's kind of fun in a math class for a break as well, because all of these units of measure that we use in the kitchen sometimes are a little bit different than what we see, in our daily lives, kind of living in the United States, where we don't use the same standard of measuring. So we talk about our temperature, outside in Fahrenheit, but what happens if your recipe is talking in Celsius? And how do you navigate those measurement differences? Same thing with thinking about an inch versus a millimeter and what those conversion rates are. So this bingo game kind of gets students thinking along those lines, which is pretty fun. So I also wanted to leave just a couple minutes for any questions that you might have. I know that we've had a really nice conversation going, but if you have any questions or anything that you want to throw out there for other ideas, now is a really great time to do so. And also I wanted to highlight that this is part of an ongoing series. I also wanted to talk about the models behind me. So if you've been looking behind my head this whole time and thinking, what is on this one, like what's on this shelf? Some of that is kind of the models that Nasco makes that are plasticized. So I have a muscle as well as fat, and both of them are about 10 pounds, and you can see the difference in structure and feel, and realizing kind of what that difference between muscle and fat are. And we have a ton of over 300 products of food that are made of that same kind of plastic that a lot of nutritionists use in conversations as part of health conversations, and dietitians use as well. So they're pretty cool projects. And then I did want to highlight quickly before I turn back to those questions, if we have any, that this is part of an ongoing webinar series. So our next FCS webinar, which will be in conjunction with the Home Baking Association, we'll have lots of kind of explorations of different techniques and using the home kitchen. And I'm excited for that webinar. I think it's going to be a great one, and that's on June 17th. And in the email that will come out with the survey, I have the link to sign up for that webinar as well. But we're excited to partner with the Home Baking Association in kind of highlighting some different culinary techniques. And as always, we have an ongoing kind of set of series of webinars, including tomorrow one on STEAM and STEM with a program called Minute to Win It. And next week on Wednesday, we'll be exploring SEL and trauma-informed practices with a clinical licensed social worker who spent a lot of time working as a therapist with students. So let's see, questions that we have. TM said that Nasco has the best DVDs and products with great instruction for middle and high school students. I have the bingo game and it works wonderful. Tracy, thanks so much for tuning in and adding that. One of the people who makes some of our DVDs is even this Home Baking Association, who's going to be in on June 17th. So if you enjoy our DVDs, it's a great option to tune in on the 17th and see some action live. And then Judith said, I'm so sorry I was late to the webinar. I was babysitting my granddaughter. I'm sure that was lots of fun. And you can listen to the webinar from the start, Judith. This webinar will be emailed to you in about 24 hours. It takes a little bit to render, and then GoToWebinar will automatically send it out along with their certificate for you attending today, and then that full copy of this webinar. Shelley said, what are FCS teachers planning to do for distance learning plus wearing masks as we return to school this fall? And what impacts are you seeing it on food labs? So if anybody out there in the world wants to, dash off a reply to Shelley, that's a great question of what are FCS teachers planning to do with social distancing and wearing masks as we return to schools in the fall, and how will this impact our food labs? I think that is a question that a lot of people are having. So if you have brainstormed this, if you have any thoughts about it, please do chime into that question box, and we'll see if we can throw it out into the world and have any brainstorm answers and partial answers or full answers by the end of this webinar. So we have kind of a lot, I think, that we're going to have to contend with in the coming months. And Nasco certainly is trying to think our way through and help along the way, because the physical distancing that's required in an average classroom is challenging based upon the needs of students versus just the structure of the buildings that we're in, and how that limits our ability to have students walk in the hallway, and making physical dividers between kids in the classroom to make them safe physically, but also worry a little bit about the psychological impact of that distance on our students, which is one of the reasons that we invited in the licensed clinical social worker next Wednesday to talk some about how kind of this traumatic atmosphere impacts our students and how to navigate some of those things. So Tracy responded to Shelley's question and said some of the things that she's seeing coming down is smaller classes, with some students going to online and some in classes in opposite grades in the school. So thinking about kind of a hybrid model of virtual as well as in person, and how that kind of impacts your ability to teach different topics. Debbie said that if we return in the fall, my first sewing project will be to make their own masks. So that's a fantastic idea, Debbie, where you're taking kind of the current climate and having students then learn how to make those masks. And certainly we've seen a boom of so many amazing, people sewing masks and giving them to different healthcare workers. And I know there's a project, in the town that I live where there are many women who are seamstresses who are sewing masks and donating them to, non-frontline healthcare workers at the local hospital. So if they work in accounting or if they work in various areas, they're using those homemade masks as protection. So having students sew their own masks is a great lesson, and no doubt then they can also make a wonderful fashion choice for themselves and have it speak to themselves as well. So a couple really strong ideas, and if you have more that you're willing to share, send them to me and I will happily add them to an email. We have your email from the registration, and we will then kind of share those out with that email that renders in about 24 hours. So send any ideas you have to me in between now and then, and I'll get them out to the whole group on the webinar today. And I really want to thank you for tuning in today. I hope that it's been somewhat useful and a pleasant way to spend a Thursday afternoon. And I hope that you all stay healthy and well, and that we'll see you soon again.